payment initiation is what you wanted to talk about. And I would like to say congratulations. We now have a new payment initiator in the Brazilian ecosystem, and you're going to hear from them first here at OBE. So we like to give you the news hot off the press. So you're in for an absolute treat. So let me start by saying hello to James. James, hello, how are you doing?
Helen, I'm extremely well, thank you. It's lovely to be with you. I think this is my second campfire, so I'm thrilled and privileged to be joining you again, especially as you're in the glamorous heights of Brazil today.
Pioneiros, which is the financial center of Brazil. I think it means pine trees, actually. I have been talking a lot about Hmrc and the use case. So literally every conversation I've had since I've arrived, everybody wants to learn about what we can share with the ecosystem to accelerate adoption. And I always cite your use case, James. So I would like to kick off by asking you some of the problems that Hmrc were looking to resolve when they look to implement open banking. Did they have a Damascus moment and say, open banking is the way we want to go? Or were there some more commercial problems that they were looking to resolve?
Well, I'm sure, and thank you, by the way, for having me, and thank you to Accenture for also helping to host the event. It's really great to be here. So I think to answer your question, Helen, clearly there were some issues that Hmrc were looking to solve. I think fundamentally, as we all know, with open banking payments and data, it's really a case of solving cost and efficiency issues. So like any government department, perhaps now more than ever with the cost of living crisis and inflationary issues and so on, ensuring taxpayer value for an organization such as Hmrc is paramount. And for all of those watching who aren't familiar with Hmrc, Hmrc stands for His Majesty's Revenue and Customs. I think that's the first time I've had to say that. And it's the tax collection department for the UK government. So it collects, I think, around 700 or 800 billion pounds a year. So it was a fabulous opportunity for us to get involved. We're a small third-party provider based here in the UK. We're FCA authorized for both the payments initiation and account information sides of open banking. And we have direct bank integration. So we don't rely on a third-party aggregator, which we think is very, very important. So we entered this tender end of 2020. We had no idea that we were going to win because it was in fact the first commercial activity we engaged in. We found ourselves in the shortlist against a small number of very large global blue chip brands. And anyway, we're very lucky to have been successful. So I think to answer your question, Helen, what we're really looking at is something you might call inherent cost dysfunction. So card fees, slow cash flow, and of course the challenges of reconciling many millions of transactions every month from a tax-paying population the size of the UK. So we were, as I'm sure everyone on this call understands, very thrilled to be able to help solve those problems.
So Hmrc were looking for efficiencies and a fast and secure way to collect our taxes. Yeah. So I'm curious to learn more around how EcoSpend resolved those challenges. And then let's have a look at the results because they are inspirational.
That's yeah, I mean, that's very kind that you should say that. So as I mentioned, we found ourselves in the shortlist. I think we certainly had no idea that we were going to win. We thought it would be given to a large global blue chip brand. Amazingly, they gave it to us. So I think hats off, or we would say this, but hats off to Hmrc for awarding such a prestigious tender to ultimately a very young startup. And I think, as I mentioned, we have direct bank integration, so I think that's very important. And the way that our CTO, Alishan, had built the direct connections and built our infrastructure was clearly very important because, as we all know, with the trust framework in the UK, not all TPPs have the same level of quality or performance. And we're just very lucky. I can take absolutely no credit for it, but we're just very lucky that our technology team is, I think, probably the best in the industry, certainly in the UK. So then we started integrating probably from January last year, and we were very happy with the speed. So I think another really good indication of the potential of open banking is how easy it is to integrate. So we just effectively supplied our API endpoints with that full direct bank connectivity to Hmrc, and they were able to go live in about 8 weeks. So by March last year, we were taking our first payments. We all huddled around this screen and we watched one of our colleagues from Hmrc actually make the first ever open banking payment. And it was quite a funny moment because in a way it felt a little bit anticlimactic, but we're now live about 18 months later with, I think, 40 different taxes. They're called heads of duty in the UK. And I think collectively across our entire customer portfolio, we've processed the best part of £10 billion of open banking payments, which again, we think is probably a record, but also it's helped improve and develop and optimize our systems, which we're obviously very, very, very happy about. And I think to answer your question, Helen, with regards to the results, I mean, clearly there have been massive savings on card fees. As we all know, the funds clear instantly. And perhaps best of all, we have this thing called perfect reconciliation. So many people here will know that when humans are involved, often mistakes are made. And Hmrc typically see a large number of payments go into suspense accounts because human beings incorrectly enter the wrong reference number. I'm really pleased to say that 100% of our payments, several million payments now, have all ended up in the right place. So the savings on not on that money not going missing is very, very significant, because you can imagine how much it costs to employ people to repatriate all those missing funds. So I think in a nutshell, it's savings on transaction fees, but it's also the fact that payments have all ended up in the right place, negating the need for that heavy lifting sort of human involvement to try and reconnect money that's gone missing with people that have made the payments.
It's an amazing story of collaboration. So EcoSpend, a small TTP in the UK, now a very established TTP, collaborating, which is the key word around how this ecosystem develops and grows, collaborating with, and I will say it because I've never actually said this either, His Majesty's Revenue and Customs. So it is a real story of success, and it should inspire every TTP out there, and it should also inspire every bank and large institution to want to collaborate with those smaller TTPs. And it is through that collaboration that this ecosystem will accelerate. It's a rising tide and all the ships will sail. So on that count, it is hugely inspirational. But also, do you just want to tell us that figure again in terms of the taxes that have been collected? Because it is a whopping, what did you say, James?
Well, I think across our entire portfolio, it's not shy of about £10 billion. Obviously, a large part of that is Hmrc, but given our relationship with Hmrc, we're not really allowed to divulge specific numbers. But you can sort of probably ascertain it's the high single-digit number, and that's from a standing start. And we had our first sort of major test last January with the self-assessment peak. January in the UK is when everyone has to file their personal taxes. And I think on the last day of January, I think we processed just shy of £250 million. So our systems couldn't have been more tested or more robustly proven, really.
And you tell a lovely story that I would like you to recall now around the training that you had to do on the customer service system. And that is a great way just to reinforce the perfect reconciliation. And what that means is nothing goes into suspense. What that means is our government, the UK government that is, has saved a colossal amount in overhead. Over to you, James.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was my point, Helen, about the lack of sort of need to, to do any reconciliation or have any reconciliation problems. So I think Helen's remembering the story. Because we're obviously a small business, there aren't that many of us. And when we got awarded this contract by, one of the largest businesses in the UK, we obviously all thought we might have to do some customer service training to prepare ourselves for the deluge of requests and complaints that would inevitably come in given the size of the opportunity. So I had to personally do what's called Zendesk training, and I'm afraid to say still can't really use Zendesk. But anyway, the best bit of all is we didn't get one phone call or email, and we still haven't had any customer service inquiries at all. So, many millions of transactions later, our customer service team hasn't been troubled, which is just such a relief, but such an amazing indication of the quality of the technology, but also the customer experience. So, your end customer, they don't care about PIS or PSD2 or API speed, nothing like that. All they want to know is that they're doing something completely intuitive. And obviously, as in Brazil, same in the UK, there's a huge explosion of the use of smartphone and banking on smartphones. People are just intuitively using this solution. We also have a QR code solution, which people can scan a QR code on the screen and complete their payment via their phone. Consumers just use it. They just think they're doing something that they've always done. There's no magic or complexity in it to them.
So would you say that Hmrc has driven open banking adoption in the UK and helped to make it mainstream?
I would suggest that it's been a complete game changer. It's always very gratifying when we hear our competitors talking about open banking, and they always reference Hmrc as one of the great success stories. I think it's amazing how Hmrc, as a government department, were able to move so quickly and to deliver such an effective program. You know, we all know that governments and IT infrastructure don't always go together hand in hand, but I'm completely in awe of Nick Down and his team, Rachel, Melanie, and others who have completely put this on the map. And they've delivered a system from literally pushing the tender out publicly to going live in almost 6 months, which is just seems to be a world record. And it feels like we are now the benchmark for which people in the UK measure the success of open banking. And it's also completely put our business on the map. We were acquired earlier in the year by a Swedish company called Trustly. So it sort of made us a lot more sort of, I think, interesting to others. And it's given us this amazing ability to scale and grow our technology with real live volumes rather than just test volumes.
An amazing success story. James, one thing I would like to touch on at the top of our fireside chat, you talked about open banking and open data. And I'm a great advocate in dividing the two, because you have payment initiation, which we're going to talk about in Brazil in a moment, and we have open data. So what are the lessons learned from payments quickly and then data?
Yeah, great question. And I couldn't agree more that open banking shouldn't be talked about as one thing. It's very distinct. You have payments and you have data, and ultimately one day they might somehow come together, but today they're very distinct services, particularly in the UK. So payments is pretty easy to understand. It's very transactional, and it's kind of quite mechanical. It's quite easy to think of a cost of a card, you know, the fact that you don't get your funds instantly, the risk of fraud, the fact that there's chargeback fraud for merchants and so on. So payments is clearly here to stay in it, and we've proven with Hmrc and some of our other clients that it's got tremendous value. But perhaps data is even more exciting given the many ways it can benefit both the consumer side and the businesses. That said, trust is everything. So educating and protecting the customer will be absolutely key, because if you're a merchant, who wouldn't want direct visibility and categorization on the income and expenditure of a customer over the last 7 years? I mean, it's an absolute embarrassment of riches in terms of customer information that you could obviously get some benefit from, whether it's for a credit card, whether it's for a loan, for car finance, for a mortgage, or customer loyalty, or much else beside. But there is still a real sort of education process, I think, that needs to happen with the customers, because data protection is everything. And of course, open banking data can also help vulnerable customers, and we're working on various projects on that at the moment. But at the same time, clearly, we want to make sure that they're fully protected as well. So I would say that payments and data in that order.
So it's a story that the data tells, because the data doesn't lie. If you had one lesson, because I've been asked this question all day, if you had one lesson that you would want to share with our Brazilian audience about lessons learned from the UK, what would that lesson be, please, James?
Great question. I think I've had a few, but perhaps my biggest lesson would be just roll with it, get something out there, test it, see how people respond, and iterate sort of in plain sight. I think there's a lot of, large companies particularly can spend a lot of time navel gazing and imagining what may or may not happen through lots of desk research, but there is no compensation, no substitute for testing.
But that goes back to that agility. That goes back to that David and Goliath. It's the whole collaboration, the banks and the FinTechs working together. I have one final question before we wrap up. Could this be replicated in Brazil?
I mean, from what I'm hearing right now, the Brazilian market couldn't be more exciting or more ready. I hear there is a real movement and momentum. So yes, 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 and yes to your question. And I'm sure we could probably agree that this type of technology will be ubiquitous and commonplace within the next 5 to 10 years across every major economy, or every modern economy in the world. So I think Brazil absolutely should be at the forefront of this, just like the UK.
James, it's been an absolute pleasure. When I'm home in the UK, that's a gin and tonic I owe you. Thank you very, very much.